Well, hello there everyone, my name is Amy, this is the Opinionated Woman, and welcome to my best books of 2022, the second half. Back in July, I already did a best books of the first half of the year, and I really felt, to be honest, far too overwhelmed at the prospect of wrapping up an entire year's worth of books. I was just like, I film my crafty reads the way that I do because I struggle to make eye contact with the camera and to sit in this kind of format without dissociating. So I was like, okay, we're gonna keep this as short as possible. So if I do like stems or anything like that, it's just because I'm trying to unmask and I'm trying to make it easier for myself. And this actually, wow, this makes me focus so much easier. I can make eye contact with the camera. Hello. If anybody ever watches my videos and doesn't know why I don't make eye contact, I am autistic. So yeah, anyway, let's get into my best books of the second half of 2022. The first book is Monstrous Regiment by Terry Pratchett. This book got me out of an audiobook slump and I was so happy that it did. This is a kind of Mulan retelling set in the Discworld, which is where Terry Pratchett's books take place, where they have a bunch of, they've got magic and different magical creatures, and it's all got an undertone of humor to it. It's not high fantasy, it's not fantasy that takes itself too seriously, it's just a good old lol-worthy time, but it's like got a lot of heart. So this follows Polly, whose brother went off in the army and then he just didn't come back, so she wants to go find him, so she disguises herself as a boy and off she goes to join this regiment. And this regiment is called the Monstrous Regiment because it's made up of a bunch of inexperienced boys, as well as an Igor, a vampire, a troll, what else? I think that's all, as far as I can remember. And Polly starts to realize that maybe she's not the only person who's not as she seems in the group. I'll leave it at that. This one was recommended to me by both my blood-related brothers, by two of my brothers, who said that this was one of their favorites, and I can tell why. It was absolutely fantastic. Then there's one that you've probably heard talked of far too many times. That is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This book, obviously, you probably have heard about it. It's about a singer called Daisy who joins a band called the Six, and they make an album and go on a tour together, and it's told in like a documentary format, so they as if you were watching a documentary and the people who took part were getting interviewed, which is a really cool format. I really enjoyed it. There's heavy drug use in here, trigger warning, but I really loved seeing like the drama and the tea of of this like complicated situation and of the downfalls of rock and roll and what it does to your relationships. And I really loved seeing the behind the scenes of writing an album. I obviously don't know how accurate it is, but it was a really cool thing for me to see, and I thought Taylor Jenkins Reid told it really well. On a completely different note, we have Unusual Grief by Yewande Omotoso. I picked up this book at the recommendation of one of the people who work with the Book Lounge, which is like my favorite bookstore, and this copy is so beautiful. Look at these. And I'm so glad that I managed to go out and get this like full priced. Obviously I would have preferred if it wasn't full price, but I bought it new because it was so beautifully written, and I've already gone to the library and read her debut. So I'll keep on picking up from her for sure. An Unusual Grief follows Mojisola, whose daughter Yinka has recently committed suicide. They were estranged at the time, and Mojisola is like really struggling with it, and she's grieving, and she's having problems in her marriage. So she flies from Cape Town to Joburg and stays in Yinka's apartment and basically immerses herself in her daughter's life to try and find out the things that she'd missed about her daughter in the time that she hadn't seen her. And she encounters some really strange and unusual things, that you wouldn't expect, but it also talks about grief in a really complex manner. And I think she's just so nuanced with it, as well as being entertaining, and the writing is, so good. So yeah, if you ever want to pick up a great African author that's set in South Africa, most of her books I think are set in Africa, Yewande Omotoso. Speaking of African authors, the next book is Coconut by Kopano Mahlwa. I've been wanting to read this book for ages, and I found it in a secondhand store, and I was so chuffed. Coconut is a South African novel, which follows two girls who would be identified as, by some, as coconuts, as in black on the outside, white on the inside. But we follow two girls who are from two very different backgrounds. Ophilwe is from a wealthy family. They're very new money. They live in a white suburb. She goes to a predominantly white school. She's very disconnected from her culture and is very much like enmeshed in like white culture, if we have a culture. Do we have culture? No, we just steal others' culture. Yeah. She's very disconnected from her like black identity, I guess. And then we're following Fix, who works at the cafe that Ophilwe's family often frequents. And Fix is from a poorer background. She lives with an uncle, like trigger warning for sexual assault. Like she's from a very bad situation, and she's trying to get herself out of there, but at the same time she's done this by being very she's very much full of internalized racism, and that makes her very disconnected from her culture. So we've got two people from two very different backgrounds that are feeling disconnected from their culture because of outside influences, and it was perfectly done, so nuanced. I will read anything this author writes. Then we have a book that I picked up from the library, and that is Homegoing by Jugs. The POC authors are killing it at the moment. And I'm also picking up a lot more POC authors because this shit is so good. Like, can you see from this list? It's so good. So Homegoing is a multi-generational novel. It's only like 300 and something pages, so it's not like a multi-generational novel, you know? And each chapter follows a certain family member, and we follow two strains of families that branch off, starting at these sisters on the Gold Coast of Africa during the slave trading times. I can't remember, 18 something. The one sister gets sold into slavery, the other sister gets married off to a slave trader. And we see how their family carry on from there. And it's really beautifully handled, because we've only got a short chapter for each person. We go through 7 generations of 2 families. So we've got 14 characters. But because she writes so beautifully, she manages to encapsulate these people so wholly in so few words. And because we've seen the generations that have come before them, we can really identify the traumas that have caused them to act the way they do, and the things that have happened to them. And it's so beautifully done and absolutely perfect. And the ending was unexpected and absolutely wonderful. So yeah, I know why this book was on everybody's list whenever it came out. I'm just a bit slow, okay? I live in South Africa. Then another library book. This was actually in the same block. I had a really good chunk of library books this year, and that's The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. Trigger warning for suicide. If you are not in a good space when it comes to suicide, actually maybe, I don't know. This book might actually give someone who's having ideations a little bit of hope, I think, because this book is basically about a main character whose name I can't remember, has decided to end her own life, and we come in at the point where it's like a few days before she's about to end her life, and we experience it with her, where she takes the overdose and she ends up in this place called the Midnight Library with this little librarian. And basically she gets this little book of regrets, which is full of all the regrets that she's had throughout her life. And then the entire library is populated with books that are different situations if she'd made different choices at different points in her life. And she gets to dip into these stories and implant herself into those narratives, like into those potential lives, and live them out and see whether that would have fit her better. And she learns so much about herself as she goes along. And for a book that is quite obviously sad, it has a lot of hope to it. And I think it ends off with a really hopeful note that I think like Matt Haig is really good at, because he is someone who has suffered from suicide ideation. I don't know if he's ever tried, I just know he suffers from depression. He understands this kind of thing, and you can tell it in his writing. I just thought it was absolutely perfect and worth every bit of hype. We have a book that I read quite recently, and that's White Chrysanthemum by Mary Lynn Bracht. This is a historical fiction novel about the time when Japan had occupied Korea. And we're following two sisters, Emmy and Hannah. Hannah basically sacrifices herself for Emmy, gets taken away by a Japanese soldier, and becomes a comfort woman, which is an involuntary sex worker who was just there to comfort, basically, get sexually assaulted by the Japanese soldiers. And Emmy, so we follow Hannah at that time and her experience, which is very harrowing. So like sexual assault, like it's very, very harsh. It's hard to read, but like the author says at the end of this, she peppered in Emmy's chapters as a little bit of a reprieve, as well as giving more dimension to the story. And it really feels like that. Emmy, we get told Emmy's story from 2011 when she's an old woman and she's trying to find out what happened to her sister, because she's, you know, gone her whole life knowing that her sister sacrificed herself for her. So it was so beautiful and so hard to read, but I'm so glad I did. And the very last one is another South African book. Woo! I had some really good luck with South African books this year. I had one really bad one, really bad, but which was my worst book of the year. Maybe I'll talk about that after I talk about this. Yes, that's what I'll do. Okay. The last book is Jugs by Shidisa Moletsane. This is a very short little stream of consciousness book that basically takes us with our protagonist who's not named, and he goes from like the townships of Joburg and then through into the CBD as he's like going on a bit of a bender. He's like mid-bender. He's like a few days into a hectic drug and alcohol binge, to a trigger warning for a lot of drug use. And we get to follow along with him and hear his thought process as he makes all the fucking wrong decisions, man. Like all the wrong decisions. You just keep on being like, oh no, he did it. Oh fuck. Oh man, but okay, please, next time just, oh no, oh fuck. You know, so it's one of those stories. But the thing that makes it also special is the fact that our main character has a imaginary friend called Ari that he talks to throughout the story. Even his friends know about Ari. He's hairy, he's small, I think he can fit on his shoulder, he's got wings. And he's full of shit. But yeah, so we're following, it basically just takes us through this one night of this man and his imaginary friend. And it was so perfectly written. I could not believe this was a freaking debut. And the author got mugged in a taxi and the original manuscript got lost and he had to write it again. Shoot me. I would rather, oh my God, like it sounds so bad. But this book was absolutely wonderful. Yeah, I'm not going to do a worst books of the year, but I will do my number one worst book of the year. I don't have it to show you because I have turned it into scrap paper. It's literally that bad, and that's What About Mira by Z.P. Dala. This book is about a woman who works in childcare, who works with autistic children, and at the beginning of the story we know that a child has died and she's at his funeral, but we don't know anything else about it. And then we go back into her living in Durban and getting married for convenience. But the thing about this book that I really fucking hated was the autistic side of this, because in the author's bio it says that she works with autistic children, but the way that she wrote the autistic children was utterly disgusting. Like, she wrote the children like they were objects. She never had the character actually interact with these children as if they were the people that they actually are, which was really fucking horrendous. And then chapter 26 came and the death of the child happened, and the way that it happened was so sick and fucked up and wrong on so many levels. But it wasn't something, because after that we were still led to believe that we should root for this character, and I just don't know what kind of sick fuck's brain thinks up something like that. And it was so ableist. It was so ableist and wrong, and I hated it so much. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because it makes me angry. But anyway, I hope you did enjoy this video. I really enjoyed making it, and I had a really good reading year. I read 102 books this year. So hopefully I can read a little bit more in the coming year. So happy new year, happy 2023, like, comment, subscribe, all of that fun stuff, and I'll check you next time.